All right, guys, we got some great news. So the Supreme Court just ruled unanimously 9-0 that Kilmar Abrego Garcia has to be released. This is a guy who they admitted, the DOJ admitted, yeah, it was kind of an error that we sent this guy. He was totally innocent of any wrongdoing. You had the president accuse him of being a gang member. The VP accused him of being a gang member. There's zero evidence for any of that. Like I said, they admitted in court, actually, oh, yeah, it turns out he didn't do anything wrong. So this is a huge deal. That 9-0 unanimously, they're saying you have to facilitate his return. So they still try to do the thing where they, like, in their language, they split the difference and try to be, like, moderate on it. But even with trying to be moderate, they had to come to the right conclusion because it's so painfully obvious that this guy was sent incorrectly and this wildly violates the law. So
right. A couple of things, and then I'll read the order. So first of all, this was the Maryland father. His wife is a U.S. citizen. 3 kids, 2 of them special needs. One of them, 5-year-old, nonverbal autistic, who was with him when he was arrested. The only real interaction he'd had with the justice system, he got picked up. He was in a Home Depot parking lot, trying to get day labor or work with a contractor or whatever. And so how this allegation even came up is you had some sketchy-ass confidential informant who claimed he was a gang member in New York, where he doesn't even live.
He'd never been there.
And he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat. And those are the things that they pointed to be
so they thought, it's red, therefore he's in a gang, right?
Basically,
Which, by the way, that's that would be the Bloods. And that's not MS-13.
Supposedly there's some sportsman. I don't know. But that was what they
they try to link that to Tren de Aragua or MS-13, red for some reason?
Yeah, and then the other thing to note is that the lawyers for the Justice Department who were honest in court and were like, yeah, it was an error. And admitted that they didn't have information on how this happened or why that happened. The Trump administration put them on leave, put that lawyer on leave and their boss for daring to actually be honest in court. So, okay, all of that being said, this is great news. Let me read this order. It's not that long and we can go through all the pieces. So on March 15, 2025, the U.S. removed Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia from the U.S. to El Salvador, where he is currently detained in what they call CCOT. The U.S. acknowledges that Abrego Garcia was subject to a withholding order forbidding his removal to El Salvador, and that the removal to El Salvador was therefore illegal because he had a reasonable claim that him and his family had been subject to death threats themselves by gang members in El Salvador. So a judge said, okay, the government cannot deport you to El Salvador, and that's what they're talking about here. The U.S. represents that the removal to El Salvador was the result of a, quote, administrative error. The U.S. alleges, however, that Abrego Garcia has been found to be a member of the gang MS-13, a designated foreign terrorist organization, and that his return to the U.S. would pose a threat to the public. Abrego Garcia responds, he is not a member of MS-13 and that he has lived safely in the U.S. with his family for a decade and has never been charged with a crime. True. On Friday, April 4th, the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland entered an order directing the government to facilitate and effectuate the return of Abrego Garcia. That language is important, so we'll come back to that.
And that's the lower court saying, basically, you got to bring him back, no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah, so facilitate and effectuate the return to the U.S. by no later than 11:59 p.m., so basically midnight, on Monday, April 7th, Monday of this past week. On the morning of April 7th, the U.S. filed this application to vacate the district court's order. So the U.S. government appealed. The Chief Justice entered an administrative stay that was saying, okay, you don't have to get him back tonight. We're going to take a look at it. The application is granted in part and denied in part, subject to the direction of this order. Due to the administrative stay issued by the Chief Justice, the deadline that had been imposed by the district court, that is now passed. To that extent, the government's emergency application is effectively granted in part, and the deadline in the challenge order is no longer effective. So we've already blown through the deadline. We put our administrative stay in place, so obviously that deadline no longer applies. The rest of the district court's order remains in effect, but requires clarification on remand. The order properly requires the government to, quote, facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. The intended scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is, however, unclear and may exceed the district court's authority. The district court should clarify its directive with due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. So they say, you're right, the government has to facilitate, but this term effectuate you need to clarify to make sure that it is not bumping up against the executive's prerogatives to, conduct foreign policy the way they want to.
Yeah, so the executive has the right to control foreign policy, so you can't say they have to effectuate his return, but they're saying you definitely have to facilitate it.
You gotta try.
You definitely gotta try because this is wildly, wildly illegal.
And this last sentence here, for its part, the government should be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it has taken and the prospect of further steps. The order heretofore entered by the Chief Justice is vacated. So
9-0.
The fact that it's 9-0 is so great.
It gives
freaking Clarence Thomas was like, "This is crazy. You gotta try to bring this."
Think about that.
Yeah,
Clarence and Brett Kavanaugh.
Yep, Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, obviously all the liberal. But yes, Justice Clarence Thomas was like,
"Hey, dog,
you all fucked up.
This is wildly illegal. This is wildly unconstitutional."
And I'll be honest with you, after talking to Pisco, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but after talking to Pisco and, reading about this case, I was concerned because there is this legitimate concern about, imagine that the Supreme Court tried to order, the Biden administration to get back a certain hostage in Gaza or something like you would, that would be extraordinary.
And that's why they're saying facilitate.
Right.
To try to facilitate it.
Right.
It's not saying this outcome, if this outcome doesn't happen, you're going to prison. It's not saying that.
I was concerned that this court would be like, no, this, bumps up too much against they can conduct foreign policy how they want. So I think it is really important that this decision came through and that it was 9-0. Now, the question for me is,
will they listen?
How is the government going to respond? Because my fear
is that... They just lie. Oh, yeah, we tried. We couldn't get them.
Yeah, or they'll...
Which would be a lie because El Salvador is acting as a contractor to the U.S. So it's not a foreign policy thing.
And obviously, if the United States of America wanted to get this man back from the prison where we are paying to have him incarcerated, he would be back.
He'd be back
tonight. Bukele has made El Salvador basically into we'll do whatever, a toady of the United States, we'll do whatever
US, yeah.
Trump wants him to do. So the idea they can't get him back is preposterous. But you can imagine Trump coming in with a wink and a nod to Bukele, hey, give us that guy back. Oh, nope, sorry, you can't do it. And then, we tried.
But we did our best. But you know what? This has downstream effects, which I think are very positive. I think it makes it so that the media and the Democrats and the 3% of Republicans that still have even the tiniest shred of a soul, that now it becomes if you don't do this, bro, you're barbecue chicken. Fuck you and the horse you rode in on. And it allows for sort of like a wave of resistance and pressure.
Yeah, I mean, if Justice Thomas can be right on this
Justice
issue,
Clarence, he's never been right on anything.
Where are you?
He's never been right on anything.
Standing up for basic humanity. I mean, the idea, the fact they sent these hundreds of people. They sentenced them to life in this torture chamber, indefinite. They have no recourse.
75% of them don't even have a criminal record. 75%, and of the ones that do have a criminal
90%.
record. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And they said of the ones that do have a criminal record, most of it is nonviolent.
Yeah.
Like your DUI or whatever.
Traffic ticket. Who knows? Yeah, I mean, it is so monstrous. You can scarcely wrap your head around it. But this is a truly, I think, a truly important victory. And I do think it will help to bolster those who may want to make a moral argument here, because Democrats have been so afraid of their shadow with anything regarding immigration. It's stand up for this man. Have some fight. Stand over. This isn't just about him either. They could do this to an American citizen. Easy.
I know.
With no due process. You can do this to literally anybody. This is about everybody's rights.
This honestly made me feel really good, though, because it made me feel like there was a while there where I started to think, yeah, if this were to happen to me or you or anybody, that they would just be able to get away with it. And the courts wouldn't even be like, come on, dog, you can't do that.
Yeah.
But this tells me that actually the courts are kind of like, nah, man, you can't do that.
They're the only institution that has that has done anything to check their power at this point, if we're being honest.
So we'll see what happens. But this also leads me to believe, final point, that the other cases that are similar to this, it's going to be L after L after L after L for the Trump administration, because they are so wildly illegal with their actions.
Yeah.
Just over the top, extreme, not even close, right? I think, honestly, now I think even just a hearing on the illegal, what's it called? The illegal
Alien Enemies Act.
Alien Enemies Act. Even that, they're going to lose that, and the court is going to say, on factual grounds, this is not, you can't invoke this. We're not at war with Venezuela.
Yeah.
Tren de Aragua is not a government.
Yeah.
You can't even invoke this. You can't even invoke this.
I feel hopeful about that too, because it's preposterous. Like, we are not at war with Venezuela.
Of course. Of course.
When you had even a judge in Texas that looked at the claims of two of the migrants that were subject to this Alien Enemies Act deportation, and even a judge in Texas appointed by Trump was like, we gotta put a hold on this.
We covered that. It drops tomorrow on Crystal Kyle.
That is really encouraging. And there was a New York judge too, but the Texas one was very encouraging. Trump judge. And so I think it does give me comfort that the Supreme Court will look at these ultimately and be like, this is not a lawful invocation. You can't do this.
And every court leading up to the Supreme Court. Like, that's the thing, right? It'll be unanimous.
I sure hope so.
Anyway, there you go. Great news.